So where I want to start then is you've uploaded all these schematics and kind of the technical details of what you've been doing over the last couple of months and years. When did this appreciation for the technical side of music start? Was that already there from the beginning?
Yeah, pretty much the first year that I started making music, I think one of the things that got me kind of curious about it, apart from playing a bit of guitar, picking up a guitar, and I always had instruments around the house because my dad made a lot of music, mainly in the sort of early 80s, but there was synthesizers kind of behind cupboards and just sort of stacked away in corners.
Right.
And I have this really distinct memory that the first time I properly looked at one of them, I thought it was a wind instrument because it was one of these. It was a Roland with a handle on it, so that you could play it like a guitar. And I thought that you had to blow into that bit. So the fact that stuck with me shows that I was really curious about what these strange instruments were. And yeah, I remember that exact time was when I started. I think my dad must have said, "Oh, I'll show you how it actually works," and got it out. And yeah, I just started recording stuff pretty much straight away.
And what was the enjoyment, especially at a young age? What is the enjoyment that you get out of making music at that point?
Yeah, that's a good question. I get so long.
No, but I can imagine it's quite different than the type of enjoyment you get from it now, just because of the years of experience and kind of.
Yeah, although I'd say it's probably more or less the same in that there's just this pure kind of, oh, I made that kind of, there's just that gratification of just, where did that come from? The surprise of something coming from nothing, because really you can feel your mind is empty 1 second, and then you can feel that there's something there, a song or I think it's just the kind of magic of the idea appearing before your eyes, your ears.
Right. And so as you've made music throughout the years, and now with this new album, then how do you, is that why kind of Gene came into being, that kind of figuring out a new way to create, where that first idea is novel to you in a way?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's mainly because if I start building a song based on a foundation that I suppose is very kind of formulaic, with drum machines and things that I've used in the past. I mean, I like recording with real drums, real drummers, but it's a long process.
Right.
You can't just kind of get the drum out and then just hit record. It's always, even if you do like a really simple one microphone kind of setup, it still takes a long time. So it's not the kind of thing where you want to be doing that when you have an idea and you don't have the space, for that setup. So yeah, then obviously trying out other drum machines, it was just like these very strict kind of grid. They're all based on this kind of very strict grid of where you want your beats, and you have a little control over swing and stuff. And then you have to think about the sounds. Like, are you going to be stuck with those particular sounds that they give you? Or like I've used samplers. And then you still have to think, okay, is this going to be a good sample to stick on there? And if not, am I going to go through a menu? I just wanted it to be all there on the controls and to have this direct connection with the kind of electricity inside the machine, you know.
Right.
So an analog sort of box of wires that wasn't, you know, too smoothed out and perfected. It's kind of it's very similar to, you know, guitars and old instruments that just have, you know, 5 or 6 components in, and you still hear the instrument. You know, it's not like smoothed out.
Right.
Kind of thing.
And when you started with this undertaking, when you decided, well, I'm going to create this machine, did you kind of realize how much work it would take, and did you kind of envision that path to where you are now?
Yeah, I knew it would be a long. I made that decision. I was like, "What? Am I really going to do this?" But I think once you've realized there's an option there, it's very hard to say, "Oh no, I'm just going to carry on as normal." You know, because it's always going to be in the back of your mind. You know, oh, it would have been better with that thing that I knew I could do if I just, you know, stuck with it. And I roughly knew it was going to take, you know, 6 months to a year. And it maybe took a little bit longer because I carried on adding stuff to it. I was like, why stop there? I've kind of made this bit work like this, and I can kind of add more to it. So I just, you know, got a bit carried away and added loads of special features, you know.
And you mentioned just now the unpredictable nature of drummers, and now I read in a bio or somewhere in another interview that this machine could be at times quite unpredictable as well. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, and I couldn't have planned it out to be that way, because I don't know that much about electronics. I picked it up just from having to fix stuff on the road, you know, having to fix equipment, like before a show or something. So that was all, and I still have the same sort of work ethic where I just poke things and see what happens, you know. I don't know the maths or anything. So right. I couldn't have really planned the way that the instrument came out that well. And some of the things that it does, I only realized when I recorded it, and I was looking and saying, well, what's going on here? I know there's, you know, for instance, the tempo is changing throughout the track, but ever so slightly. And then I realized what was happening is, I think the instrument is warming up as you play through the track. It's right. You know, the warming up. And luckily that means it's speeding up slightly, which is really close to what a real drummer does, you know. So it's about 2 BPM from start to finish throughout the song. That's like really close to how a real band would kind of, you know, keep the energy kind of building up, you know. So there's lots of things like that just help, really, in my opinion.
Right. So when you started writing, and now I believe that when you started writing, once the machine was done, you kind of struggled a little bit because of kind of the logical mindset you needed to make that machine. So what were those first couple of efforts like, where you tried to figure out how to work this machine, but also how to mix it in with the other things that you do?
Yeah, the first recording I did actually has ended up on the last song on the record. Okay. So, and at that stage, it wasn't in a box yet. It was the sort of wires and controls just all laid out on the floor. And I had like different things plugged into it, and I would never be able to recreate that, whatever that setup was. But the final machine is as much of that as I could kind of fit in a box, you know. So the experience of that was really a bit bewildering, because it was like, this sounds great, but how do I record a song onto this? And you can hear that in the last song. It's not really it never really settles into a song or a particular idea. It's almost just like a sketch pad, and it is me kind of working out what kind of direction I could go in, so yeah, there were a few recordings like that, and then I think the first time I obviously settled on, this is how I can use it. It doesn't always have to be all the bells and whistles.
Sure.
Was when I came to record Beginning.
Okay.
And I just said, you just do kick, snare, kick, snare. So I ended up using it in a really kind of generic way, but it's still, I feel like it's still got its own character that comes through,
Right. And when you started Beginning, that was one of the first ones you started fleshing out?
Yeah, well, it was the first song that kind of made sense as a song. It didn't just sound like... so I think before that, I had Kissing of the Weeds, which was just a little idea. Yeah, I just had a few, what you'd call verses or choruses and bits of songs. Beginning was the first one that it was just start to finish a song in a day, pretty much, because it was an older idea. It was a song from probably written in about 2008 or 9.
Okay.
And
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I used to play it to people when we were trying to get a record deal for later the Pier. So that must have been 2008. Yeah, I think we signed then, or 7. 2007. Anyway, whatever year it was, we were playing that song, the original version, which is this really, it's almost twice the speed of that, like really brash electronic thing. And it was almost just to gauge the reaction of the label. So it wasn't like a very nice sounding recording back then. So it was just to see how they would react and whether they were kind of keepers at that stage. And I could never finish that song just because the way it was recorded was kind of so, I don't know, it was just kind of crappy, really.
But that's interesting then, because you have this version of that song, and now more than 10 years later, it kind of evolves into this new version. So I can imagine the way you pictured it when you first wrote it is quite different at how it turned out. So what was that process revisiting that song like? What kind of, how did you see that song, and how did you kind of shift it into what it is now?
It really only took form because I used to play it a lot, and it was just always one I returned to on the guitar. And the guitar is something that I kind of went off the guitar for years. And I think it's just because it was always my responsibility almost in my band. It was, I had to do the guitar, and I guess it just became a chore, or I don't know. It's weird to talk about it like that, but I never became, I guess I never fell in love with guitar. It's always been that I've just had to try and make things with, and it turns out to be the best tool. But I suppose on this album, I just started playing ideas on the guitar again, rather than trying to write things on, in electronic instruments. And that I knew I was doing that when I built the drum machine. I knew that was kind of the way I was going with songwriting. So the drum machine was kind of there to support the guitar.
Right.
And I guess you could say that I now do kind of love the guitar, because at the moment I just write everything on there. And I think that's a good way to be, because it means that I'm not changing things all the time, I'm just kind of, you just play it as it is, and you don't kind of, it's instant.
And what I find interesting about kind of that approach then is because obviously beforehand you don't really know what's going to come out because there's a lot of experimenting and trial and error. So is there a moment in this whole creative process where you kind of have a feel for where an album is going, where these batch of songs are going?
Yeah, I always think you have to get about, well, sometimes it takes until the end of a record, but I think with my first album, it took until the absolute end of the record, like the last song, to know what that album was going to be like. This one, it was a little bit quicker to see it emerging, and I think that's just because it was written in a smaller time frame. This record, it seems like I have been away for a long time, but the record was actually written and recorded between really 2017 and 18. Okay. Which is still long for some people, but so I knew about halfway through the record, I could see there were similarities and there was a kind of thread throughout the songs, and it was a bit kind of unknown how the other half of the record would sound. I really only knew there was 1 week in early 2018 where I recorded 3 songs just in the same week, and it was Rubber Sky, and that was Sudden Thing, and the little Peace Lily, that kind of outro. And What Moves, actually. Okay. Might have been all of those tracks in the 1 week, and because they all share quite a similar sound, that was suddenly there I was like, the record's here.
It's starting to take shape. You can kind of picture it. And
yeah.
Well, a couple of things, because firstly you say, well, it's the process wasn't as long as people might expect, and I don't know if it always has been, but is music a very insular thing for you? I mean, I know you play with other people, but the creative aspect, is that a very solitary thing you do?
Yeah, I think it is. Even when I'm working with other people, if I'm starting to form an idea, I might just kind of, go quiet or seem to be kind of daydreaming or something. I don't think it works as well for me to sit and sort of say, oh, how about this? How about that? The real kind of, I think that one of the things that doesn't work like that is melody. And, if you've got a hook in a song, there's something about the movement between the notes. There's always this kind of like, I suppose the identity of the whole song is just within a few notes, and you'll have that like a motif repeated throughout the song. That thing is not something you can really discuss with people, like how you're going to make that,
right.
Just has to come to you. And the best way is really to just be, I guess, absorbed. I've heard somebody describe it as, what's it called? The flow or something like that. There's like a musical term for like being in the flow, or I can't remember what the thing is. But you don't notice it. That's the great thing about it, is you can spend all day trying to get there, and then you might be just there when you stop trying or something. Suddenly it's like, so I don't know if that answers the question. But
I'm just trying to kind of get your approach or your perspective on songwriting. So especially I can imagine with Gene now, and you have all these other types of equipment that you work with. it can also seem like the possibilities are endless in what you can do. So did you have to be strict with yourself and kind of limit yourself to where you wanted to go on certain songs?
Yeah, I think it's a bit. I think other people would maybe have to be strict, but I suppose I have to just be content and not expect some of the things that maybe in the past I've expected a lot from a song to have. I was always kind of very insistent on having a lot of kind of twists and turns. To, this kind of song would just have to jump from one thing to another just to kind of, I think it was always because I was trying to wake people up a bit with my music in the past, or be a bit confrontational. And
sorry for interrupting, but very quickly, how come? If you think back of it, why was that? Why did you kind of want to stir the pot a little bit?
Well, I think it's because I realized that was what how I kind of stood apart from other people. I just remember people saying I never heard music that's kind of that. I think we just got described in my first band a lot as being schizophrenic, and I think we just wore that as a badge of pride, really. We thought, people find it very hard to write songs that way, and it kind of came naturally to us at the start, and then I just carried on doing it that way. I just thought, I've got a minute into a song and I'm already thinking, right, that's fine, but we're going to go somewhere else now. Where are we going to go? And that just became a real habit. And then I think with this record, it was really time for me to say, let's see if we can enjoy this idea for a bit longer,
Well, if we, I think what moves is a good example of the kind of what you mentioned, kind of the returning melody or chorus. So how did that song start to take shape, and what were your thoughts on the song as you were crafting it? Because I'm sure that might have been a bit different for you then.
My thoughts on that one. Well, I knew that I wanted to just repeat the melody because it was only effective like that. I think if you sing that melody once and then does something else, it doesn't really have an effect. It's the kind of I don't know if you call it like hypnotic or something nature of it that is the whole point, I suppose. And when I knew that I wanted to do that, I just realized how I'm going to have to change the music underneath. So I did just create these long chord structures. I think it's probably one of the longest chord structures that I can think of in one of my songs, because it will go through almost, I think it's like half the chorus, and it will be going through about 8 different chords or something. And I didn't really plan it other than that. The rest of it, just keep playing, So it was all one take of the bass line, which was on this tiny little keyboard, and then one take of all the guitar, and then I think mostly one take of vocal. And that's interesting, really, because I just roughly knew there was going to be a chorus now and again, and I was just fine with the idea of being formulaic in that way, just have 3 choruses and some verses, and I just didn't think there was any need to fight against that.
Right.
Yeah.
Because one thing I can imagine, kind of tying in with what we talked about with making decisions and limitless possibilities, is do you have to kind of stop yourself from overthinking in a way where I can imagine everyone can get in their own minds and kind of dismiss a song or a creative idea they have, but sometimes I hear from artists you just have to finish ideas and to see if it works, and if it works, it works, no matter what the method or kind of the outcome.
Yeah, I think it's just it takes a long time to get good at that. And I don't know if there really is a trick, because it's different from song to song.
Sure.
I think What Moves is an unusual example in that I didn't really think about it that much. I just felt kind of happy, you know, with it as it was. It didn't really occur to me to really change it that much. And I think it was just because I was trying to preserve the simplicity of it, you know, just hear the sounds in there. But then another track on the record, like What Do You See or Monochrome, for example. Yeah, with those songs, I would always be sort of saying, oh, maybe I shouldn't do it like that at all. Maybe I should strip this entire bit down and have, it was always a fight, even to the point of sending the record off to mastering. I was like, oh, I could have done this.
Right.
You know, I could have made a totally different song. There's so many ways to do that idea.
Right. You mentioned monochrome, and now and this is always tricky because you don't know if what you read on the internet is true, but that you like to think of songs in colors, and then I'm interested in kind of that idea of synesthesia as well. So is that first of all true? But do you have kind of certain senses with these songs, certain colors or visuals, images that pop up?
Yeah, but I think there's only a few times where it really is important to the kind of process. Maybe I do it subconsciously. You know, I know that this is kind of a yellow song, or you know, I used to know pretty much exactly what I was, because I would think about it in that way. I would say, one example was Bathroom Gurgle, one of the old Late at the Pier songs. That was purple and green, and it always, everything that I did to it had to fit that purple and green. It was just this kind of gross color scheme, and I was like, yeah, I have to fit that. But now I think maybe the colors, the kind of sound colors that I'm using are a bit more like background, you know, like a blue sky or just, you know, a kind of warm hue that then I can put a lot onto. So now I think, I don't know, maybe I'm still thinking in colors, but I'm just not as strict with the color schemes anymore.
Right.
Some of the songs on there are a real kind of technical, like monstrosity of colors. But What Do You See is one of those songs where it's just, that seems to be just every shade thrown in there, and it's, I don't know what with songs like that, it's totally just like, oh, this is making me kind of laugh, and there's something good about it, so it's gonna go on the record. You know, I'm not sure it'll stay like that. When I play it live, I think it's gonna, you know, grow into something else, or, you know, might change color. Yeah.
Fair enough. Because well, you mentioned songs like What Do You See, and then you have these. You play with for instance, your vocals and certain dynamics and pitches, and you morph certain sounds, and then throughout the record, and I think you have done in a lot of music that you made. So how do you approach kind of your own vocal lines and for instance certain melody lines playing on the guitar and kind of apply them as collages or almost, or can you take me through that process a little bit?
Yeah, there's something that I the way that I mix vocals with the instruments is I don't tend to think of them as being totally separate elements, and they're more like harmonizing with the vocal. And I judge a good vocal take based on like whether it seems to harmonize and I guess glue with the other instruments. You know, there'll be times when it strays off, and I really like vocalists who do that, who just kind of, you know, the music's over here and then the vocal is just off, floating. You know, there's something quite liberating about that. But I suppose that it's not something I can really get my teeth into, because I don't base songs on lyrics. You know, I think if I was more lyrically based with my songwriting, then I could just let the words kind of fly off the page, you know. The way I write is more of like a sonic, textural, I guess, thing. And then I see what words are in there, you know. I'll kind of put down all of these demo takes, and then often they stay on the record because there's words in there anyway, or close enough, you know. You'll hear a lot of that on the record where it's, yeah, that's nearly a word.
Well, there were some times where I couldn't really quite make it out. So that could be just you kind of creating a word. But are those words that pop up in those demos then kind of stream of conscious type things that you maybe look out later and think, oh, maybe that was spinning around in my head?
Yeah, I think there must be, and you know, a lot of the stuff gets thrown out because it's like, well, that's just singing the same word over and over again, or, you know, some stuff I kind of reject it, but it's just sitting there until I can work out what the lyric is, you know, what I'm actually singing. Like, there's one song that didn't make it onto the record, and I just worked out what I was probably singing, you know, what was going through my head. And I was like, oh, you know, of course, it was just one word different to what I thought it was. It made no sense. It was something about, it was maybe, the lyric was, maybe when I have died, I'm going to take a jet plane for one more ride. And I was like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, and I realized what it was. It should have been maybe before I die, you know, which makes a lot more sense.
Right.
I'll take one more ride before I die, which I think is based on this story that I heard about this guy who was an airline employee. He wasn't a pilot. I think he had hopes of being a pilot, and he was like a disgruntled employee, and he just snapped one day and stole a plane off the runway. And he was doing, you know, these amazing aerial maneuvers that nobody could work out how he could do, barrel rolls and all this stuff. And he was talking on the radio the whole time, just sort of saying, you know, it's a beautiful day. This is, you know, exactly what I wanted to do. And then he just kind of found this exact spot somewhere in a forest where he wouldn't kill anybody, you know, and crash land. I guess, you know, I heard that story a few years ago, and then I just sang it.
And then, yeah, it's interesting how those, well,
just come back.
Yeah, exactly. The one that stuck out for me a little bit was Open My Eyes, in terms of, I both like kind of the flow of the chorus and how the words kind of fit together, but then also kind of the I don't know how to describe it. I'm not a musician, but kind of the drive underneath it. So what was that kind of, what was that song? And then you mentioned you're not very much into lyrics, but from a lyrical standpoint, when you look back at that song, what do you hear, and kind of the overall atmosphere that song creates?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know what the song was about because I had the chorus before anything else, Open My Eyes. And that was really tricky because I thought, yeah, it sounds a bit egotistical, like I can see, you know, you can't. I'm opening my eyes. Yeah. So how am I going to put the rest of the lyrics together with this when it just sounds like I'm saying I know loads of stuff and I'm going to tell you all this stuff that I know. That was a really tricky one, and I think that took the longest to write the lyrics for. And writing, that's I suppose a loose term really, because again, I just had to record a lot of different things and see what kind of words came out. And let me think. Yeah, I think that the lyrics, like a lot of the songs on the record, they're sort of loosely autobiographical. They're about, especially times when I was younger, when there wasn't a lot to do. There weren't sometimes friends to go and see, you know, for whatever reason. You'd just be like, well, I'm just going to kind of walk around on my own in the countryside. And the interesting thing about that is that you could have a day where you were just sort of wandering around, you know, kicking stones by a river, but your memory of that day isn't what you did and what you saw. Your memory is more what was going around in your head, you know. So I think there's a lot of stuff that I draw on from my youth where I try and, I guess, try and paint a picture of sort of my mental state at that time, rather than, oh, I did this and I went over a bridge and, you know, that kind of thing.
Rather than being descriptive in a sense, it's just kind of presenting you with this type of feeling, or
it's more just to kind of revive a bit of that stuff. You lose all that stuff. It's really hard. Even if you write a diary, you're not going to write about these kind of abstract things. So I guess this is my way of trying to catch some of that stuff before it fades altogether, or
right. You know, well, finally then, because if we take with what you've just said, then is that kind of what you, and always obviously people can take away from your music what they want, but is that kind of what you hope that they can get out of it? Kind of getting that sense of that they can connect those feelings to something in their own lives.
Yeah, I think that's a really nice thing. It's really lovely to kind of have that. That's something that gives you a better connection, I think, with your audience. And it's interesting because their interpretations often are a lot more concrete, and that they link them directly to things in their life more than you might do. You know, I remember this one lyric that I wrote on a song, never used it, but it was years ago. And it was something about a Coast Guard. And I don't even know if I've ever, you know, had any interaction with a Coast Guard, or, you know, like anything like that. And it was something happening at sea with a Coast Guard, if you see a Coast Guard coming. And this friend that I had at the time was just like, you know, that the best summer of my life was when me and this other guy that I knew, we were out there and floating in the sea, and we were getting out into this kind of dangerous part of the ocean. And this Coast Guard came out, and he was telling me this kind of whole story that was just like this, just random lyric. I think
that's interesting. Yeah, how that works.
It was weird because it was really close to the lyrics of the song. And he was just like, yeah, I felt that. You know, I was like, oh, yeah, I'll write more stuff like that. And I think that's why I always keep things in, even if I don't understand them.
Right. Now, last question then. Obviously, we're living in strange times at the moment. You've been working quite a while on this record, and well, yeah, your previous record was quite a bit ago, and now you're set to release it, and then this whole virus thing happens. How do you see kind of the next couple of months, and has this changed kind of what you want to do with the album?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really plan much for my music once it's done anyway. I just kind of, yeah, I suppose for me it was a weird thing because other people, when this all happened, their existence was altered by this. You know, they went to work here or there, and then they suddenly couldn't do that anymore. And in a way, you know, I was really lucky because the only thing that this has done for me is keep me kind of doing what I was doing anyway at home. When I kind of realized that, I had these plans of touring and doing all that stuff, which I was getting really into that idea, you know, kind of ready to do that. And it would have been a rush, to be honest with you. I had this, you know, US tour booked, and I was just at the last minute, just before it got cancelled, I was stressing because I was trying to make all this equipment kind of work together, and it's taken way longer than I thought to make a lot of that stuff work. If I had gone out to the US at that point, it would have been pretty funny to where it would have just been stressful, man.
A couple of shows would have been interesting.
Yeah, definitely. I don't think a lot of stuff would have gone the way I'd planned. Let's put it that way. But yeah, with regards to the record, I don't know. It's funny to me to actually see it doing the same thing it would have done anyway. You know, people kind of getting into it and growing with it. And it's nice to see it from this perspective, to see that it can just be out there, mostly kind of, well, physically, it's on its own out there, you know. I'm not out there. And it kind of reminds me of the old days of MySpace and, you know, the early internet stuff, where before I had played live, where it was just this magical thing of seeing your music travel around the world while you're sitting in your bedroom, you know, at home, still living with your parents. And I guess this is like that, really. There's something kind of yeah, there's something quite wholesome about it. But yeah, I do obviously still, I'm kind of still keeping the thread of the live thing going, because whenever it's back on, I just want to be straight out there, you know.
Right.
So I just keep playing things and, you know, doing these live streams. I see it as more of a practice, really.
Right. So have you figured it out how it's gonna work, or is it still a work in progress?
Yeah, no, it's much closer. Yeah, okay. No, I think I could go out, like if I could go out next week, I'd be out there, and it'd be great. But yeah, I mean, there's so much other stuff that I have to do, you know. I'm still building machines, and made a video the other day.
Right.
That should be out soon. That was pretty interesting. It was one of those lockdown videos, I guess you could call it. It's going to be great looking back at this era and seeing, I mean, I guess people probably make compilations of the best lockdown, you know, stuff. And just how you can see how people are creatively when they're just forced to do something on their own. Right. I've only seen a couple of people's videos, but yeah.
One thing I can say just from my own perspective is that whenever you see music videos that cost $1 million, they're not very good, in my opinion. But when it's just a couple of friends and a camera or something, those are genuinely kind of the more appealing videos to me.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people. I guess that's been happening for a while now, where people are waking up to that the personality is the main thing, and that I think there's some quite stale attempts to inject that into things. You know, you'll get, I don't know, not that I've seen anything, but I feel like somebody like Robbie Williams is probably ages ago was trying to put his own like video phone calls in his music videos, or you know, to play on that kind of personal thing. For me, I think the best balance is a little bit of equipment, like a little bit of planning, you know, a kind of camcorder or a kind of funny old camera, and making a little set, you know, a bit of magic basically, but the rest of it just really just thrown together and shot quickly. For me, that's the best music video. And as you say, just with a couple of mates, you know. Yeah, everything I've done has just been either just me and my brother, or just me. Yeah.
Valid question. Then, which song is this that you made the video for?
The one I just did is I don't know whether I'm allowed to.
Oh, okay,
is it
fair
okay?
enough. Then don't mention it. If people will see it when it's out.
I probably am allowed to say. You can't ask the amount of stuff you'd have to ask your label. Like, oh, and is it okay if I do this? You know, one of the things for me that I didn't realize is I'm not allowed to. It's not like a real live show at the moment when I play live, because I can't play anything from my new album.
Right.
You know, I can only play stuff that's already been released.
Okay.
So I had about that, and I was like, oh, you know, they I suppose they were trying to push me to do a live stream thing, which was a good idea, but they were kind of saying, you know, you can make it exactly like a live show, and then but you're not allowed to play your new stuff. And it's like, that's the whole thing, man.
Yeah, well, exactly.
Yeah, so that's going to change in a week, or what is it now? A couple of weeks.
27th, yeah.
It'll be out, I suppose, the record.
What was the exact release date?
I'm going to say June the 4th, but I might be off. It might be June the 8th. No, June the 4th, I think.
Yeah, it's probably gonna. So that's next week. Then yeah, I'll post this somewhere next week.
Yeah, nice. So everything I said is kind of irrelevant at that point. I can play anything I like by the time this comes out.
That's good. All right, Sam. Yeah. I'd like to thank you very much for your time.
All right, thank you.
And good luck with the album release. And yeah, in a way, I suppose then for you, it's almost like a blessing, right? That you get to spend some time now with your family, and you get to do what you like to do, which is being creative.
Yeah, it's a blessing either way. So I was lucky to be in a win-win situation with it. But yeah, I'm missing everybody. You know, everybody who wanted to come and see me. I'm coming back. You know, I'll be back.
All right.
All right.
Thanks,
Wicked.
man. Thank you very much.